I'll present the perspective of human and urban resources in Qaqortoq as a case for urbanism in Greenland in general. Okay, so just to get a sense of who the audience is. Who here thinks that the key to unlocking Greenland's potential lie in a stronger economy? Who here thinks the key is social welfare? Who here thinks the key is a magnificent, fascinating, and nuanced interplay between the economy and social welfare? When we engage in debates about development, it feels like we have to choose between the first two options, right? My hope is that by the end of this talk, you'll feel confident advocating for a third way, where social welfare and business don't have to compete for resources and attention, but they get to work together in synergy. I'll do this by reframing what are Greenland's most overlooked resources, away from the public funds and the natural resources, and toward the finicky and enigmatic resource that is cities and the people who live in them and around them. So for those of you who don't know, Qaqortoq is here. It's Greenland's fourth biggest town, and it's the educational hub in the southern region. It's also one of the 3 places that there's an airport being built. I'd been there for a month when the news broke that it was going to be built, and as you'd expect, there was a lot of celebration, and the municipality was quick to start hosting a slew of meetings to help kickstart the processes necessary to capitalize as soon as the first plane landed. And that's when I did something that a lot of people found weird. I thought, wouldn't it be cool to conduct an investigation into urban redevelopment and write a report about it? I didn't expect to be paid, and no one asked me to. What I thought was interesting about redevelopment was that it would be a different but hopefully insightful perspective to supplement the dominating development debate. I mirrored it to what the planners were usually doing. They were usually occupied with growth, with adding new buildings, with growing the population, with attracting newcomers, especially working ones, and increasing the level of service proportionally. I understood redevelopment as almost the opposite. It wasn't about getting more buildings, but about making the ones we had function even better. It wasn't about growing the population, but about appealing to the ones already living here to prevent them from moving away. All in all, about things that were nice, but not strictly necessary. In particular, I wanted to know, how can Qaqortoq better fulfill its niche as its region's hub for education, youth, and culture? Or in other words, how can Qaqortoq become the best version of what it already is? Part of my motivation here was also to map what are the good things that we want to protect, because sometimes when you make a massive infrastructure investment, like an airport, it can have surprising adverse effects if you're not careful. So I thought it was timely. My inquiry went a bit like this. We'll start with the institutions. These are the daycares. The school is here. The high school is just across the street. Here's the after-school program, the library, the tourism and economy school, and here's the folk high school, and the gym and sports hall. Early on, I learned that the school wasn't doing too great. There had been a lot of turnover in management, and I was told that many parents had moved away specifically to take their kids to better schools. That's not great for any town, but especially not for one that's supposed to be a youth, culture, and education hub. And it's not great for the region. It leads to higher turnover in young adults, the children's parents, who could otherwise be very well rooted in the community, both professionally and socially. And the smaller a community is, the more important it is that there are people who stay there. Otherwise, the town might as well just be a trawler or a mining camp. As a friend of mine elegantly put it, complexity requires stability, or it crumbles. I heard a lot of people suggesting how they thought the school should be improved, and I read articles where the municipality itself stated that we needed to look into it and find out what the problem was and make a strategic plan. Now, I'm no expert, but I know this much. Schools are really complicated. A lot of things need to work at the same time for the school to work well. It also depends on factors that are entirely outside the school. That means there's very rarely one root problem, and any singular strategy is likely to fail. So I thought, I don't want to even try to tell them what to do, but I can ask them if there's something they need outside the school to do what they do better. And so that's exactly what I did. I went to them. I had meetings with the principal and with the 2 teachers, and I asked them what they requested. They had 4 requests. 1, guaranteed spots in the kindergarten for teachers in order to be able to attract younger teachers, especially the newer generation of Greenlandic teachers. 2, better ventilation. 3, more after-school activities. 4, better stuff, meaning interior, equipment, and schoolyard stuff. The kindergarten and ventilation I figured I couldn't do much about. I could write in my little report and recommend that the municipality prioritize these things in their budget, and I did, but apart from that I couldn't see much I could do. The other 2, though, I thought there could be ways. So I highlighted those, and I went on my merry way onwards to the high school. In the high school's fancy new building, I met with the Forstander and asked him the same thing as I'd asked at the school. He said, "We're very happy with our new building, but we have no canteen. The youths go to Bistrot. And the food they buy here is expensive, it's not healthy, it's all imported and refined, and they don't get to sit and have quality time. They used to go to the Seamen's Home, but that's closed. I tried to negotiate a canteen when the facility was rebuilt, but they just wouldn't budge." Noted. Now the activities. As in most places, there was a lot of football. There were 2 football fields, here and here. The gym hall had indoor football, handball, badminton, and climbing. The school gym was used for basketball, taekwondo, and rope practice. And then there really wasn't a lot that wasn't sports. The school had Galatius language classes for Danish people, and there was also evening courses in sewing, which was popular among women of a certain age. There was chess in the library once a week. There also used to be a woodworking workshop, but that had closed. There still was a stone and bone workshop, but that was mostly used by adults who made souvenirs to sell to tourists. I learned that the kayaking club did many things apart from kayaking. They built kayaks, both in their own building but also at the school. They also practiced rope training at the school's gym. They barbecued and went on yearly travels to the National Kayaking Championships. I also learned that their building was in a dire state of disrepair, and they much wished to have it rebuilt as a slightly bigger building to accommodate more people building kayaks and socializing. I had great hopes for this, because there happens to be many philanthropic funds who target their donations at buildings, for activities, for the youth, for cultural heritage, and sports, and this ticked all 3 boxes. I learned there used to be a culture house, but there was no more. I also learned there'd been many plans for new culture houses, and that one of them was a 100 million krona project for an extension of the gym, which would be a combined swimming facility and conference center, which had come far until it was paused in 2008. I learned there was a sound studio at the after-school program, which could be used by different age groups, even adults, at different time slots, but that it was a bit awkward. There were semi-frequent concerts, some at the town square, some in the hall, and some at the high school, where there were also occasional movie screenings. All in all, I learned of many events throughout the year, but that the town was pretty dead in the summer holiday. During the summer holiday, many left town to During the summer holiday, many left town to sail out into the region, or they flew on vacations abroad. During this time, it could be dull to be among the ones who stayed. I learned that during the previous summer holiday, there had been a record number of windows broken, presumably by youths. Vandalism was generally on the rise. I heard many lament that it had become harder to find adults who would volunteer as night ravens to patrol at night, and that there had been many more volunteers in the past. I also learned that the night ravens used to meet up at the old police station, here. But the police station moved, and now they didn't have anywhere to meet up. The story of the Red Cross was similar. It was almost always closed because they couldn't find the volunteers they used to. The building looked like this. It's small, it hardly has any windows, and no bathroom. I didn't find it surprising that not many people wanted to volunteer to stay in there, which brings me to the buildings. When I looked at buildings, I paid particular attention to three things: how big they were, how much they were being used, and how central they were. The more they were any of these things, the more interesting they were to me. Here's the center, and what I was trying to find out was which buildings were already adding a lot of value, and which ones might it be possible to get even more value out of. We'll sort them out one by one. This is the old church. This is the assembly hall. It is protected, so it's not very flexible for renovations. The same goes for Inuit care. It's not very interactive, which begs the question of whether it could be used for something more interactive, but the building isn't very attractive for most interactive uses because of the windows. Qaqortoq, the local newspaper, is also protected and has smallish windows. You might notice a trend. The Pacific frost storage is a very passive use, but it does have utility, and supermarkets do tend to function well in city centers. Out of all the buildings in the center, this one is sort of in the shadow of the hill, and its view is blocked by other buildings. So all things considered, it might be quite optimal that this is the one that Pacific uses as storage. The use might not seem the most interesting to a stranger, but it's actually well frequented, and what's more, it's logistically practical that it's here. Which brings me to our Arctic line. It's obviously utilizing its function by the harbor, and so many things go from here to the rest of the town on a daily basis. So though the building takes up a lot of space and it's not very pretty, it's actually very reasonable to have it here. I'd also argue it adds to the life. It's been proposed to move it entirely out of town, but I think the center might feel dead then, and it would lead to increased through traffic. The museum is also in a protected building, and that also utilizes its central position, as does the cafe. Onifit, which is a daytime facility for people with developmental disorders, is very central, and I had the impression that they appreciate their central location because they go on daily walks around the downtown. But they don't use up all the space in the building, so I thought maybe they'd function just as well under slightly different circumstances. The old power plant is a sizable building, and it's one of the few that's not protected, which means it can be rebuilt without restrictions. I had a meeting with the utility company Lucasiafir, and they told me that they saw no issue in it being rebuilt, such that it could both function as an emergency power plant and as whatever interactive city center thing anyone might want to do there. The Red Cross, as you know, struggled to get volunteers, and I think it's reasonable to guess they might get more volunteers if they move to a different building, more fit for them. So I marked this building as having underutilized potential too. The culture office was also not big enough for their needs, so this was another suboptimal match between building and function. It is protected, but it already has better windows or light conditions than most of the other protected buildings, so ultimately I saw some potential in this one too. And then there's these two. They function amazingly. They face east and therefore receive plentiful sun the first half of the day, and boy do the retirees take advantage of that, as they sit here and partake in the activity around the harbour and the wet market. It's social, it's practical, it's sensual, it's a continuation of culture. It's photogenic and authentic looking for tourists, sure, but mostly it's just great for the people living here every single day. It's not always sunny, and on those days you can sit in sesame instead and get a cheap cup of coffee. This is likewise a wonderful place to be, and many people have it as part of their routine. And then there's this one. It has the view of the harbour, the square. It gets marvelous sun, especially at noon. It is not protected, so it can be rebuilt to suit whatever the use calls for. And it's a private office. This perplexed me. Private offices are notorious for being really flexible in where they're located, so why was that here? I thought, this is the heart of the city. With these views, it's bordering on sacrilege that people sit here on computers behind closed curtains. I thought there should be a zoning law that said that private offices can't be here, and which requires that the buildings here are used in a more interactive way. It's like that in many city centers. You might have seen it here. It can be good money to sell off the ground floor to high bidders who want offices here for exposure and prestige. But if too many of them are offices, you'll end up killing off your own sender. So I looked online, and lo and behold, there was a zoning law. Can you guess what it said? It said that private offices can't be here. It said that they can be in the surrounding areas, just not here. And it had said that since 2003. It also said that significant deviations could only be allowed through the creation and signing of a new zoning law. Having heard this, you might understand how I came to my conclusion of what high-impact actions could be taken for Qaqortoq to better fulfill its niche. Now, I want to make one thing absolutely clear. The following ideas are not my own. They were synthesized from ideas I'd collected, of which there were more than 200, and that was intrinsic to this project. I only put the ideas together. I will present to you the top 3 ideas I evaluated as having most potential for impact, but first, some honorable mentions. One idea was a new office for the culture department, so that the Red Cross could move in there instead and hopefully have an easier time getting volunteers. Then the building they left could be run as a studio for the older segment of users that otherwise used the studio at the after-school program. Excuse my terrible visualizations. Likewise, there was the idea of a new office further up the hill for the tax service and the TV station, such that this building could be transformed into a workshop, makerspace, and rental for startups. I figured if it was a workshop, then one of their ongoing projects could be to design, build, and maintain interior for the school. I thought the idea with third most potential was this one, a culture house in the old power plant. It has the location and the size unlike anything else in the center. I suggested that it could function as an afternoon hangout place where you could stay downstairs by the corner and enjoy the foot traffic, or you could retreat to a quiet corner upstairs and study or do group work. The philanthropic funds may support culture houses if the project is well developed, so I suggested the municipality start arranging citizen participation meetings to get the process started. I also thought it could have a lot of impact if the kayaking club could be rebuilt, and therefore I recommended that the municipality give them permission to renovate their building while I volunteered to help the club apply to the philanthropic funds. Number 1. I hope you might have guessed it. I expected that it could have a lot of impact if we helped this office find another place to be. I figured public support might even be high enough that we could cover the cost with local fundraising, such that this building could function like a bistro where students and adults could eat cheap and simple lunch while basking in the midday sun. If this was done, not only could it reinforce this area as the heart of the town around noon, but it could also once again host night ravens at night, and they could invite the youths into a positive and welcoming environment. It's hard to say what would happen if any or all of these ideas were made real. My expectation is that it would have so many positive spillover effects on so many aspects, including business and social welfare, that it would be hard to even imagine. And I think it could be a striking proof of concept to lead the way for similar courses of action in the rest of Greenland. But until we try it, we really can't know. Now, I think you might have learned a lot more than you realize. Let me sum it up. Urbanism in Greenland is and can be a thing. It is not too cold or too small, and central locations matter, even though there's plenty of space all around the cities. The microclimate is important too. If you're against a surface that faces the sun, that's a lot of possible yearly comfort hours, especially if you make sure to go out around noon. You probably know this already. And it's important that the city center is mostly flat, because it gets slippery when there's ice. In a way, you can read Qaqortoq's downtown as the physical flat stretch all around this slope. It's literally downtown, like so many other towns around the world where the river meets the sea. Now, I just tricked you, because these things are no different from the rest of the world. Urbanism in Greenland is not meaningfully different from anywhere else. And there's a real risk of making it worse by trying to make it different. In Cities for People, Jan Giel actually proposes a number of parameters that make up a good town square. And by those parameters, the square in Qaqortoq is perfect. It even has all three occurrences of water: a harbour, a river, and a fountain, the iconic Bistrot. What's more, we're familiar with these goals in development. But why do we have them? They don't seem like end goals. What if we agreed on an end goal of more families staying in the cities across generations? Yes, young people can and should leave for a while, but the dream is that they return when it's time to settle down, such that their social and professional heritage can be carried on across generations. Just for the sake of thought, compare that to the opposite. Imagine what happens when you're more interested in attracting people who stay for just a short while rather than people who start families. It seems all too familiar to me. Let's return to the goal of keeping families. If you keep one generation and keep at it for 7 generations, well, then you've arrived at the Haudenosaunee 7th generation principle. Contrast that to the modern European growth paradigm. There are conflicts here. And that's not the only sense in which this redevelopment perspective can be interpreted as anti-colonial. This way of working that I did was one where I tried to remove myself as a planner and instead let the communal wisdom do the planning. In the current context, it also seems radical to plan for locals rather than potential newcomers. Ever since the colonization, the development has been about attracting foreigners. In that way, we have de facto been planning for Danish people. Would it not be a profound step away from that to first and foremost plan for the people already living here? Also, it's a special time in Greenland. For the first time ever, the public welfare system and for-profit enterprises are overtaking the functions of society. Functions that used to happen informally on a smaller local scale. I think that seems exciting to a lot of people. But that formalization of functions has led to disappointment in the rest of the world, where many countries have reinvented and rediscovered older traditions of cooperation. These are functions between friends, families, neighbors, clubs, and organizations. In those countries, it's been called the third sector or the voluntary sector. I think it's a matter of time before we also discover it here. And the places I've been advocating for, the Bistrot, the kayaking club, the culture house, the Red Cross, the harbour and the square, they're called third places. I didn't know these terms before I started the project, but I think it's uncanny how well they map onto my findings. At the beginning, I promised you I'd reframe Greenland's most overlooked resources. I don't think it's the public money. I don't think it's the natural resources. I think it is the places. The central, well-lit, accessible places, even in the smaller towns. I think it is the philanthropic angel funds. Many of them are just waiting for applications from this country. And I think it is the people, especially the parents that volunteer for their kids, but also the people who are living in Nuuk and in Denmark, and who are deeply ambivalent about where to live, and who are waiting for the day that other cities live up to their potential. When we recognize those as resources alongside, or even ahead of public funds and natural resources, then I think the towns can start living up to their potential to bridge the gap between Nuuk and Denmark and the rest of Greenland. And I think when that happens, the cultural and geographical divide that the colonialism caused will finally start to heal until it is but a chapter in history. Qaqortoq.